Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the first edition of Editor Versus. I'm Melissa Manlove. I have worked at Chronicle Books for 20 years, and for the last couple of years, I've been at Source Books. And as well as being a children's editor for a couple of decades, I've been a children's bookseller for a couple of decades. And I am excited to try this out with you guys. Ariel, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. So I'm a senior editor at Chronicle Books. I've been there for almost 17 years at this point, and I'm the picture book lead at Chronicle. I also have a book selling background. Um, I had some surgery earlier this week. I thought I would just acknowledge it since I know I look a little different than normal. For those of you who know me, it's healing up nicely though, so I'm doing okay. I'm so excited about this class. What a team. Okay, Eileen, over to you.
Oh my God, Ariel, you look beautiful. So
Well, thank
whatever.
you.
I was recently at Charlesbridge, publishing, and what else can I say? I have not been a bookseller, but I did work in a bookstore, Walden Books, when it existed. I was much older than the younger kids there. And I was really good at selling that card that gave you a discount. The manager loved me. Oh my God. But I was not good at shelving the books at night when it came time to close. So the young people would just run around and they put on music, and I just stand there, you know, and they do it for me. I know even though I was only in my, gosh, how old was I? Maybe late 20s. I was working at Scholastic at the time and decided to take on an extra job to learn more about the business. And I think they thought I was old. So anyway, I am so happy to be here. I'm excited. I can't wait to get started.
So late last year, I had this idea that would allow me to basically hang out with Ariel and Eileen. Um, and and I was thinking that, most of the time when there is educational opportunities to hear an editor talk, it's just one of us up at the front of the room. And even when I am very confident of my opinion, which I generally am, um, I know Ariel is laughing. um, it doesn't mean that there aren't other perspectives that are equally as true. And and that always felt like it was missing. And so what I'm hoping for this session as we go forward is that you hear several perspectives that are all true. And you get a chance to kind of balance truths against each other and get a fuller idea of what publishing is really like through our different perspectives. What about you guys? Are you excited about this?
Definitely. I love that introduction, Melissa. So when I first started as an intern at Chronicle Books, Melissa had already been there for a while, and I remember going to my first editorial meeting and thinking that Melissa was in charge of everything. And that lasted for 3 weeks. I didn't understand the organizational structure for 3 weeks. So I love this. I love Melissa's joke about
Was I an
confident
editorial
opinions.
assistant?
I don't know, but not quite in charge, whatever it was.
It's true, I'm
Um,
bossy.
in the best way, Melissa, in the best way. I have been so excited about this concept in part because I think there's this idea that an editor comes in with their red pen and says what is right and wrong about a project. And I am just so resistant to that idea, and I'm trying to talk about this more. That that is not what editing is. Editing is actually about relationships. It's about partnership, and it's about creating a shared vision and making sure that whatever you're creating is really executing on that shared vision, and then really communicating that vision to the world and communicating that vision back, to each other, and making sure that we're always kind of, in line with whatever that vision is. And that comes out in so many different ways over the course of the project, but really that it always comes back to, for me, it always comes back to that relationship. And then of course what is best for the book. So trying to talk about that more and trying to talk about all of these different ways to be an editor. Maybe I'll tell one more story, which is that I remember really early on in my career at Chronicle, all the editors across adult and children's got together and we were supposed to take a personality test. It was one of these kind of like corporate exercises where we had to take a personality test. And I remember someone very high up and in charge said that the proper combination of traits for an editor was that you would be bold and intellectual. And I forget the third thing, there was a third one. And
Wow.
I was the only editor in the room who did not have bold as one of my personality traits. I had the other two, but I did not have bold. And I remember I was an editorial assistant at this point. I was very junior, and I remember just feeling awful about it, being like, "Oh my goodness, like maybe this really isn't the right career path for me. Maybe I can't do this." And over the course of a long time, I started to find other role models who did it differently, right? That you don't have to necessarily be this bold with a capital B. It can manifest in different ways. And so finding some kindred spirits like Eileen and Melissa to hang out with to show that we all do it differently it's so important to me personally. And I hope that it will be important to you guys too as you're, looking for those editorial partners in your work.
Oh my gosh, I am so jealous, first of all, Melissa and Ariel, that you've had this great experience together, and I've not worked with you guys. I've known of your work, and I've spent a lot of time with Melissa, and we just love each other and discuss all the things. But oh my God, what a great experience, you guys have together. I started out totally differently. I did not. Plan on publishing. I was a big lover of reading. I spent a lot of time in the library during the summer in high school, no less. Um, and I just loved it, but I didn't know what an editor was. I didn't go to school to be an editor, none of that stuff. I majored in English, probably like most editors do, and you just love reading and you just kind of go down that path. And I actually wanted to work in magazines, and nobody would have me. So it was the days of temping, and I finally landed a job at Scholastic. But I didn't even know what Scholastic was. I didn't remember like the little flyers that you get the books from and all that kind of stuff. And so I thought, okay, but it's a job in publishing. I had no idea I was at one of the biggest companies, out of the in the world, pretty much. And I started out in marketing, and my manager saw my talent, and I said, I really want to be in editorial. So since I was already there, I was there as a temp. And check this out. I came on the very last day that the marketing assistant was leaving. They had had a job in for a temp to replace her for 3 months, and no one responded. And then here I come by some luck, and ended up coming on the very last day that she was leaving. So I worked, I think, for about, I don't know, 6 months or so in marketing, and then I got hired in editorial. But then I got hired to the boss that nobody wanted to work for. Thank goodness she's not in publishing anymore, so I can say this, but I won't name names. Um, but I had that way with people like that, and that were kind of, just very tough. And she taught me a lot, and she took me to every single meeting. I was probably the only assistant that got to do that kind of stuff. And after she left, I had my choice of jobs, because I think what everybody assumed, and they were right, that if she had taught me, even though she was hard to get along with, if she had taught me, then my knowledge was valuable. And so I got my pick of the directors, what grade level I wanted to work on and that sort of thing. And that's sort of how it started. But most of my career, it's just been, on the desk, do this, do that, figure it out, that kind of thing. And I was made for that. So I really, really enjoyed that. And then, I went on to other companies, but I never got to work with Melissa or Ariel. So
We're changing
now's
that
the
right now.
time.
You know
Now's the
that,
time.
right?
Yes,
Today is
until
the
today.
future. This is it. All right, so I'm going to drop some of the things that we are thinking about talking about today into the chat so that we all have it in front of us. And let's dive in. Does a picture book really have to be under 500 words, and are there exceptions? And I mean, there are always lots of exceptions. always. Like, choose a question. There are exceptions. Um, but, I guess I would say a lot of picture books these days are sold to parents of kids who are preschoolers. The age group of picture books has gone down over time, which makes me very sad because I think picture books are for everybody, but it's also just a fact. Um, and parents are usually buying a picture book to share with their kids at bedtime when they are tired. And so, yeah, shorter is more appealing to those parents. They do not have a copy of the Velveteen Rabbit on their shelves because they know that their child, not wanting to go to bed, will choose that every night just to delay things. And so they're thinking in those terms in the bookstore. But what are some exceptions to this rule, guys?
Hmm. Ariel, you want to?
Like it definitely shares some exceptions. But I also am just thinking, I feel like my job is to argue with you right now, Melissa. Like I'm supposed to, and it doesn't really come very naturally to me, but okay, all right, let me just try here. Um,
You could try going, you're wrong, and then agreeing with me.
yeah, that's pretty much what I'm gonna do right now. Um, So, okay, the last couple of years, I feel like we have had so many conversations as an industry and, among ourselves, about how much the industry has been changing, right? We are at, as parents and caregivers and people who are reading kids' books, I feel like we are craving really great read alouds that are like transportive and entertaining and going to create these bonding experiences between parent and child and help us escape this, rather challenging world that we are living in at the moment. And so I feel like I'm seeing slightly longer picture books that make for really good read alouds for that reason, but also slightly longer, like almost like storybook kind of, read alouds coming back. Also seeing that as parents are wanting their kids to, read chapter books at younger and younger ages, that they're actually wanting to increase the tolerance of their kid to read longer books. And so I am seeing a little bit of an interest in slightly longer picture books again that I haven't seen basically in my whole career.
Hmm.
Are you guys seeing that too?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah.
I
I
feel like
think you're
it's
right.
I feel like it's in the water at least. I
It's
don't
in the
know if I'm
water.
seeing
Yeah,
it
yeah.
as a really big movement yet, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't disagree.
And
Yeah.
That's
I'm not
probably coming.
sure, but I'm not sure, guys, that publishers or editors are still going for that.
Yeah.
There's still this thing about the 500 word thing, which I've never believed in, even when it was being touted all over the place. I think a story has as many words as it needs,
Mhm.
though
Yeah.
you can't write a 2,000 word picture book, or a 3,000 word picture book. To me, that's not a picture book. And how can is there more than one story in there to tell? Um, and that depends on what kind of picture book you're writing, right? There are these longer story picture books. A lot of those that I've seen have been more historical, kinds of books or fairy tale-ish kinds of books. But perhaps that's changing, Ariel. I see a few here and there, but I agree with Melissa that, it's not this trend kind of thing. I'm still looking for authors who can deliver emotion and deliver a plot if needed, um, and kind of make that all work with a succinct amount of words. But I'm definitely not going to judge them on first pass. But I will be kind of curious as to why this is 2,000 words or 3,000 words. Do they really know what a picture book is? Or does it really need that many words? And is it really a chapter book or not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've just been working with an author illustrator who delivered this sketch dummy with gorgeous writing, truly gorgeous writing. But it was so descriptive, it was so redundant of the illustrations, and we just had to cut all of it, right? Because it read like a middle grade novel, even though she was an illustrator. It was really interesting, so we had to go through and cut that material. I thought I would just state the obvious and say nonfiction is often an exception. So I happen to have Safe Crossing
Ah,
nearby, so grab
yes,
that.
yes, yes, yes.
I always think about something like Seen and Unseen, which was originally acquired as a picture book and of course, ballooned in size to 132 pages, but is fundamentally visual in what
I
it's
love
doing.
that. I haven't seen
With
that one. When did that come out?
ooh, a couple years ago, I'll send you one,
Oh,
Eileen.
okay.
I,
It's
Okay.
I
Oh
would
my
love
God, I
I would
haven't
love for
seen
you to
that
have
one.
one.
As you can see, I read a lot.
Oh,
I'm packed full of stuff. Those are all library books on the
oh
floor
my
there.
goodness.
I have a
And
Oh,
collection of
it
library books on the floor
always
too.
it
me too. That's funny.
amazes me. Oh my God, it amazes me when someone says, "Oh, have you read this? Did you read that?" What do you mean? Of course I have. Nope, I haven't. So it's I want that. Yes, I want that.
I will send you a copy.
And the first one you showed too, is that yours, Jen? Because I saw you get happy about that.
Oh, no, but you might be friends with Carrie, Jen. You guys kind of live in the same area. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yes, yes. Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, yeah. This
okay.
is a
Yeah,
special one.
I gotta get
So,
that one too. Okay.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah. Anyway,
nonfiction.
just
I
kind of,
agree.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, nonfiction tends to be quite long. But the thing I love about nonfiction is that it has a lot to break it up. So it
absolutely.
doesn't feel long.
And a lot of it's in the back matter too, right? So we're
Yeah,
still
yeah.
talking about a visual medium.
Right.
Yeah,
And what do you guys
absolutely.
feel about maybe I'm getting off the subject, Melissa, just steer me back.
That's all
But
right.
what do you guys feel about back matter in the back? So I've
Oh
seen
my
some
goodness.
back
Ariel has
matter
so
that
many
is
opinions
just
about back
like,
matter. We should hold on to that though and save it for a nonfiction week. Let's
Sounds
come
oh,
good.
back to back matter
Sounds
yeah,
then.
that's a good one. Okay.
All right. So let's see. Do you prefer to paginate the manuscript yourself, or do you prefer for the author or illustrator or designer to paginate a manuscript? I mean, yes, instant brawl. Like,
I prefer it to be paginated.
yeah, from the author.
Yeah, okay. Not true. Not true and not true. I have read picture books that are not paginated and it doesn't bother me, but I find myself, doing it in my head.
Mhm.
So it's so much easier if I know your intention when I get the manuscript. Doesn't mean it's not going to change, and I probably will change it as I'm, doing my things. But it helps me to also I read picture books out loud, for the flow and the rhythm of it. So it helps to know what you're trying to do with it. And paginating, I think, does that. So I'm gonna say yes, even though, it's not gonna make or break, you know, anything. You
Yes.
guys disagree?
No, I am also in your camp, Eileen. But I know Melissa and I can argue about this one, so I'm excited
Uh-oh.
to get into it.
Uh-oh.
Uh, but I'm with you. I really I love pagination as an editing tool. First of all, I think it is so powerful for all of you who are writing picture books to think about how you're chunking your manuscript, making sure there's enough variety on each page visually so that the illustrations aren't going to be too repetitive, but also so there's not too much text on the page. Um, Lots and lots of reasons. I think it's really powerful as an editing tool. I don't necessarily care if you send it to me paginated. As long as you're doing the work and I can tell you're doing the work and I'm not getting like a big block of text like this, which, we do sometimes get picture books delivered as if they're middle grade novels, right? And I immediately know kind of, oh, this person's newer to picture books.
Yeah.
So as long as you're doing the work, I actually don't necessarily care if you send it to me paginated or not. But I do almost always work on pagination with the author ahead of sending it to the illustrator and the designer. And I think that there are a couple of reasons for that. One is a very businessy and kind of boring reason. I, as the editor, am responsible for the P&L and the money behind the book. And if the pagination somehow is incorrect in our system, or production gets the wrong number, or we change it and somehow we didn't communicate properly with the team or whatever, it's actually it's my head on the line when the unit cost, the price of the book changes when it increases. So I like to have a lot of control over that, just from a business perspective. And then pagination is so important to the content of the book. So I have actually two kind of horror stories. I won't go into real specific details here, but I have two kind of horror stories of pagination getting messed up. One was a book I inherited from another editor who had departed, and um, no one here, don't worry. And um, final art had already been delivered. The manuscript had already been copy edited and translated. It was at this really final kind of stage. We were already at these formal routing rounds that were routing through our office. And and the pagination was wrong on it. And we actually had to have the author deliver new art to kind of create a new ending to the book, and new text and an author's note, and retranslate, go through the whole translation process again for the author's note. And it created a lot of very last minute like churn and hustle to kind of try to accommodate, what we really needed in order to print the book. Physically. Like we needed the page count to be correct. Um, and then the other story was actually much more minor, but it was a wordless picture book. And somehow someone on our team got the wrong page count in mind. And luckily, I had put it in the manuscript, even though it was an entirely wordless picture book. I had put it in the manuscript that like lives on our server that people reference, and we were able to like kind of go back to that document and say, okay, here's officially what it is. We've already thought this through. So those are kind of two reasons. I am also thinking about the level of experience of the illustrator. So Melissa, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk a little bit about that, and then I might come back in and argue with you a little.
I mean, that's fair. And actually, I tend to agree with everything that both of you guys just said. Um, I do believe in letting books be the length that they want to be. But as we've been saying in the chat, it's always worthwhile to kind of dummy out your book, to paginate it for yourself as a revision tool so that you see like where the text is piling up, or where there's a whole bunch of text and not a lot of opportunities for the artist, stuff like that. Generally, my preference is to take any pagination out of manuscripts when I send it to the illustrator, just to see what they do with it. To give them that openness, and invite serendipity into the process. But sometimes, as Ariel is starting to allude to, you're working with a very new artist and they need a little bit more guidance than that. Um, and then sometimes I will paginate something for them. And of course, if the artist comes back to me and says, could you paginate this for me? Absolutely. Yes. Um, but I also believe in letting it change in the process. Sometimes you really think it's going to be this many pages, and then you start seeing how the text and the art interacts, and you think, oh man, we really need an extra spread here. We need some more space there. The book is going to get longer, and I think that has to be okay. Picture books are so short as pieces of art compared to practically everything else. You like the right length becomes so important.
You know what? It has to be okay, but it's not always okay with the money people.
Yes, and that can be tricky. I mean, it
Yeah.
is part of every editor's job to fight, to
Yes.
be to be in there to give
Yes.
other people problems when they're being a problem. Um, but yeah, it can be tough. It can be tricky to kind of navigate the bureaucracy of publication.
And I just want to add, Ariel, before you go back with Melissa, because I'm agreeing with both of you, so I'm not really arguing here. So I'm looking forward to seeing you two
All
argue.
too nice. Look at
Um,
us. Can't even let me try.
oh my gosh. Um, oh, wait until we land on a topic we really disagree on.
Okay, all right,
Um,
all right. We'll
That'll
get
be
there.
fun.
I think also pagination helps not only not only the flow and the rhythm, but for me, the emotion. I'm looking at, how do I feel when I go to each of these spreads?
Mhm.
Is that momentum building? The story could be building in momentum, but how it's paginated um, can make it take on a very different light when you actually have the book in hand. So for me, that's important. So maybe I might move a line, here or a line there or stop it here because there's more impact. So I think pagination, seeing the intent from the author really helps me. I don't mind paginating it myself either, but seeing what the author's intent is really helps me to um, really delve into that emotional part of the that part of the not the text, but that part of the process.
Makes sense. Did you have anything else to say about this, Ariel?
Of
Oh,
course
no,
you
not
do.
really.
Okay, all right.
No.
Then let's move on to how much say should an author have in the illustrations, if any?
You know what
Um,
my first thought was?
yeah.
None, none, absolutely none. No, no, no.
See, I disagree
Um,
with that.
I okay, I'm being harsh. I really am. I'm being harsh. And obviously I don't work that way either, but I guess, oh boy. I guess because I've worked with some authors where it has become a problem. And
Yes.
when they don't trust the process, when they don't trust the illustrator, when they don't, and there has to be a certain amount of trust there. So I guess that's where the no is coming from. So go ahead.
No, I hear
I'm
that,
with you.
Eileen.
Yeah.
I do. I think sometimes when an author like gets very anxious about, every sketch that comes in or every iteration of the cover and they're holding on, you can just tell you send them something and they're holding on so tight and they're so scared. And I have so
Yes.
much empathy for
Yes.
that emotional state. I really
Yes.
do. But
Yeah.
I also have seen that sometimes the micromanaging that can come from that, or the really long emails with, tiny little comments, that it doesn't necessarily lead the illustrator to do their best work, even though I always want to know what the author thinks and I am always going to share everything, right? But just to build on
Yeah.
what you're saying, Eileen, I can see that it doesn't always um that kind of micromanaging feeling doesn't always lead an
Yes.
illustrator to do their best work.
Well, no,
Yeah.
and I disagree with sharing everything too. I think you as the editor, you have the experience. You take that what the author is saying to you, you talk about it with them. I mean, you tell them your thoughts and how you think things should go. But if a person comes back to me with really nitpicky thing, you have to be careful with the illustrator too, because then they start to either
Yeah.
lose interest or passion in the book, or they do things like a robot, so
Mhm.
you're not getting their full potential there.
Yeah.
You're not
Yeah.
getting, and that's what I think writers have to understand. You have to, once your manuscript is out there, it is, it's no longer yours
Mhm.
fully. It's no longer yours. It is everybody in the process puts a little bit, we're not trying to take away your voice. We're not trying to, I'm so adamant about this because I have worked with authors who love them dearly, but when I tell you that every time you send back a piece of art, it's like, oh my God, we are never going to get this book published. And it really is not, especially if you work with an author illustrator. Sometimes, not all the time. I've had very wonderful relationships with author illustrators, but sometimes, um, it's their vision, right? Even more so than the author who has written a manuscript. I mean, they have that. And so sometimes it's really, really tough. Um, it's really, really tough. I worked with a writer who's, well known, got a lot of, books out there, but she's also been an art director. She has a history. So that was really tough working with her because we have an art director, right? So it was just, it was a lot. It was a lot. I mean, the book came out beautiful, but it was tough to talk her down, you know, certain things. But I think that's rare. I think that's rare. I just think writers have to trust,
Yeah.
in that communication.
I guess I would put this in terms of art notes in the manuscript and then later like the author responding to sketches or something. as like your feedback should be not about individual things as much as about goals. Like it's one thing to add an art note that's like, okay, the character is going to introduce this book by saying like, here's my cat. But the point is, it's not a cat, it's some other animal. And that's fine.
Yeah.
That plays to like what's actually going on in the manuscript and talks about your goals for the narrative. Whereas if you're like, no, it's not a cat, it's a duck. But does it need to be a duck? If it truly needs to be a duck for what happens in the story, then fine, say that. But if it doesn't need to be a duck, that's just what you were imagining, step back. It's so important to keep stepping back and going like, okay, what actually does this story need? What does this book need in the art? How does like is the artist coming at it from a different perspective than I am? That could be awesome. Leave yourself open to that serendipity of the artist coming back with something that is totally different from what you pictured, but still good for the book.
Yeah.
And yes, Eileen, I've absolutely gotten good feedback from an author that is just like, well, I'm not going to say that to the artist. Like, my job here is sometimes playground monitor, and if people start throwing sand, it's not going to fly.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we all
Yeah.
have to play nice with each other. And, if you have an artist and an author who becomes convinced that there need to be three children in the family pictured, but there's nothing in the text that says that that's required, I'm sorry, I'm going to let the illustrator put the number of kids in that they want.
Well, and I would want to know why. Why are you so adamant
Well,
on that?
exactly. Yes.
What does
It
this mean? Does this,
absolutely
because
always coming to it with curiosity.
well, yeah, and I think when you give a person a chance to explain, what they're thinking, maybe there is something there. And
Yep.
then maybe they didn't realize that I'm sure they wouldn't lose a whole character. But maybe, sometimes we have stuff in our heads, but it's not on the page. So it is worth a discussion.
Absolutely. Yes. Always. All right. How are we doing here? Um, when is it okay not to set the story up first, especially in picture books?
Oh my God. Okay, I'm sorry, guys. I gotta say something about
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Um, I I don't like story setups.
Yeah.
Um, but they are needed. I just wish that sometimes they were done a little bit more creatively.
Keep talking.
And
I'm
I'm
gonna go grab
always
a couple of books.
okay, and I'm always looking for that creative start. So I always say go back to your beginning, and is there something you can do there to make this? Because it's the first entry into this world. Um, and I don't believe that all books need um, a start necessarily. It depends on the book. I just believe children are smart enough to catch on. I really do. Um, but that depends on the story. It depends on the skill of the author. It depends on the book. So I'm not a big fan of story starters, but I wouldn't suggest that you not have one. I just say think about it really careful how you, because we have this formula that we work by, right? And sometimes you got to break that formula to make a piece of work more interesting. I mean, there are a lot of picture books out there. How do you get this besides the cover? Which you don't have any control over. How do you get that reader, pumped up from the start, curious from the start?
Aileen, we have a couple of questions about exactly what like a story setup is, and I'm thinking that you're talking about how much context you're giving at the very beginning, or if you're dropping straight into the narrative. Are you right into action? That's what you're talking about?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay,
yes, yes,
okay,
yes.
great. Melissa, do you
I,
have examples?
well, I guess I'm wondering whether this is going to feel like the setup that it does to me, because I agree that sometimes stories, and I mean, I see this a lot in novel submissions, like the first whole chapter is basically just the author dumping all of the world building and character setup that they've built up in their heads onto the page. And then, like, normally you need to cut them. You need to just like lift it out of the book and then look at it and think, okay, what are the pieces that I absolutely need? And how can I sprinkle them into the plot as it gets moving? Because you should start where the story starts, not where you started.
Yeah.
When I think of story setup, I think of something simple like Sophie Squash, where it goes,
Oh,
one bright fall day, Sophie chose a squash at the farmer's market. That is an appropriate amount of setup, right? But
Really good.
when I think about books without setup, I think of this one, for instance, The Skunk, because it goes, when I left my house, there was a skunk on the doorstep. And I mean, structurally, this is basically a hero's journey, but without the first and fourth pieces of that journey on the page. They're just implied, which I think is really fascinating. Um, but the implication is there and the reader fills it in. I
yeah,
think
yeah.
if you've read Understanding Comics, which is a brilliant book about narrative sequential art, um, Scott McCloud talks about this idea of what is implied in between panels. You go from this scene to this scene, and our heads, our imaginations connect them. Our imaginations fill in what does connect those two things. Like um, you, I can't remember exactly his example. It was something like um, a woman looking scared in a bedroom with a shadow falling over her. And the next scene is like a city skyline and a scream. And our imaginations are like, I know what just happened. Now, that's a more mature um,
Yeah.
leap in like that connection. We can't do a ton of that in picture books because kids are not as good at filling in the blanks as we are. We've done so much reading in our lives. But it is worth understanding that picture books also have that gap that our imaginations fill. And it's super powerful to think about what can your reader fill in for you and that you can then leave off of the page. Because the more you make your reader engage with their imagination and their participation in the book, the deeper you draw them into your book, the more they become attached to your book. And like,
And the more that they forget their reading,
yes,
you know.
at play in the fields of imagination, right?
Yeah. And I love what you said about you know, what I forget how you said it, but what the reader is going to fill in. And I think that that plays a part in knowing the age group that you're writing to, because they only have a certain amount of prior knowledge, experience with things, depending on, the child. So they're bringing that just like we bring our experience and our trauma and all kinds of things to a particular situation. I'll never forget teaching a class with Harold Underdown. There was a specific book he used, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's very, very old. And he read this passage about these children on a train. They're traveling by themselves, and there is a flood while they're on the train. And I remember him saying that, he had done some stuff in a couple of different parts of the country. And this particular time in the Midwest, where he was reading about this, and they had totally different reactions. And he hadn't taken into account, I think the particular state he was in had been through a flood of some sort. And so their reactions to those kids being on, they had filled in based
Mm.
on their own
Hmm.
experiences, right? Which
Aw.
was totally different when he read it someplace else in the country. So you also have to think that your books are going far and wide, we hope, and there's going to be children are going to imprint themselves, imprint their lives onto this, and hopefully they'll learn something new in the process as well. and as they get read to over and over and over again, I think those synapses are gonna, you know, make um, come to new conclusions about things. I also saw in the comments that Jen and then Ari said it about using um,
The
the
end papers.
yes, yes, yeah. What do you guys think about that?
I love that. I am generally hesitant about the author providing those ideas, but again, goals, not specifics. It's
Yeah,
okay to share your goals
yeah,
for like what the art is supposed to be doing to support the text, but you want to stay away from, the other extreme is the people we see in Slush who are like, Sylvia is a little blonde girl in a pink sweater who looks just like my grandchild. Here's a photo.
yeah,
We
yeah,
don't want to work with those people. They are disrespectful of the artist, and you are really half of the team. The artist is the other half.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes. This is Rosie. She doesn't like it when I talk to the computer.
And what does she think about story setups, Melissa? Would
Yeah,
she like to argue with
exactly.
us?
I don't think she has any opinions about that. What about
Oh.
rhyme? Let's move on to rhyme before we run out of time. And I'm sorry, I just rhymed. Dad, rhyme, yes or
Uh,
no?
if you do it well.
Truly, always the answer, right? Like the reason you see so many editors and agents being like, "Don't send me rhyme," is because they've seen so much bad rhyme. What are the things that you see going wrong in rhyme? Let's talk about that.
Actually, I want to talk about why to rhyme. I mean, I think
Okay.
I was
Yeah.
talking earlier about how I think we're craving really great read alouds right now. And I think rhyme is such a beautiful way to create an engaging read aloud. As I was kind of thinking about what we were going to talk about this morning, I started thinking about Bathe the Cat, Melissa, which is one of your books.
Uh-huh.
And what an incredibly satisfying read aloud that is, just because, in part because of the rhyme and how everything is mixed up, and you kind of are tumbling from one page to the next. It's so raucous, but it's like such a satisfying read aloud. I was also thinking about Buffalo Fluffalo, which was one of my favorite books from last year and has been this incredible bestseller. So I think there's a way that the industry has been very vocal about, kind of being hesitant about rhyme for a long time, but I'm actually seeing some rhyming books really succeeding in interesting ways right now. I mean, I think Good Night Construction Site is another excellent example.
Yeah.
Um, and yes, you have to do it really well, but I never want to say that, you shouldn't rhyme because there's a lot of great examples of successful books that do.
I think that I say don't force it. Write the story, and if it's tumbling out that way, then go for it. You know, I don't know, picture books are a lot like poetry to me. So, you know, wouldn't be a bad idea to look at some poetry and see how, you know, people do it. Not just people that write children's books, but older, poetry as well, just to see how that works. Even if you don't know anything about, like the A B and all of that kind of stuff. Not that you have to become an expert in that. But I think, going to those books when you're trying to do, but I say let it flow. If it just keeps coming out like that, then maybe perhaps it's meant to be like that. I don't know that I'd sit down and say, I'm going to write a book in rhyme. I don't think, I think that that doesn't make for a good story necessarily, unless you have that kind of control, like a Jane Yolen or a Nikki Grimes. I'm going to write this in rhyme. They kind of, they know exactly, they have a purpose there and they know how to do that, off the top of their heads. Um, but I think rhyme, assonance, consonance, alliteration, all of those things are great for children's books. And not only do they play in the market for schools and libraries, that use read aloud, that do read alouds, but They also, depending on the subject matter, are great trade books and a lot of fun for parents and children, to sit down and read. And they foster memory. I don't know if a lot of you remember when we were younger. I think most of the stuff I remember today is because it was either taught through song or through rhyme, one or the other. Whether it was, well, of course, the alphabet, but, like the states and, all of this stuff. And I think a lot of that still stands when it comes to kids really, you know, um, um, learning. So
Yeah,
I think that's great if you can do rhyme, um, but I just say don't force it.
beautifully said. All right, I think we are about out of time for this session.